The Jedi Council chamber was plunged in tense silence as Anakin Skywalker remained seated, fingers interlaced over his lap, trying to control the storm of emotions sweeping through his mind. The lights of Coruscant flickered through the wide windows, indifferent to the drama unfolding within that sanctuary of peace and contemplation. He had made a decision that would change everything, a choice that would define him not just as a Jedi, but as a man. He would remain there, trust the Council, trust Master Windu to do what was right. Padme's voice echoed in his mind, reminding him that the path of light always demanded sacrifice. And perhaps this was his moment to truly embrace the teachings he had struggled so hard to understand. Each passing second seemed an eternity, but Anakin did not move, anchored by a resolution he had never before felt with such clarity. The hours dragged like centuries as Anakin meditated, something he rarely managed to do with genuine inner peace. But in that moment, with the galaxy's fate hanging in an invisible balance, he found a center of calm he had long sought. The teachings of Qui-Gon Jinn, transmitted through Obi-Wan, finally made complete sense in his consciousness. To live in the present moment, trust in the Force, allow it to guide his actions instead of trying to control it with fear and ambition. Anakin could feel the Force flowing around him, through him, connecting him to all living beings in the galaxy. It was as if, for the first time in years, he could truly breathe without the crushing weight of prophecy, of fear, of the imminent loss that always haunted him like a persistent shadow. While Anakin waited in the temple, Mace Windu confronted Supreme Chancellor Palpatine in his office in the depths of the Galactic Senate. The battle was fierce and brutal, with rays of dark energy tearing through the air as Palpatine's true face was finally revealed to the galaxy. The Chancellor so many trusted was actually Darth Sidious, the Sith Lord who orchestrated the entire Clone Wars from the beginning. When Windu finally ended the confrontation, he immediately contacted the governmental bodies and the Senate itself, exposing the monumental betrayal that had infected the Republic's heart. The transmission echoed through Coruscant, revealing that Palpatine was a Sith, that he had manipulated both sides of the war, that everything had been an elaborate farce to destroy the Jedi Order and take absolute control of the galaxy. The news spread like wildfire through communication channels, shocking trillions of beings on thousands of worlds. But in the shadows of power, Vice-Chancellor Mas Amedda watched it all unfold with calculating, cold eyes. He had known the truth about Palpatine for years, had been complicit in the manipulations that fueled the Clone Wars and destroyed countless lives. Amedda had no intention of allowing his master's plan to be wasted simply because Sidious had been defeated. With Palpatine dead and the Chancellor's office vacant, he invoked emergency protocols long ago planted in the Republic's foundations. Order 4 was activated, an obscure directive that allowed the Vice-Chancellor to assume complete executive powers in case of the Chancellor's death or incapacitation. Within minutes, Mas Amedda had declared himself interim Supreme Chancellor, and with this newly acquired authority, he executed the final order that Palpatine had prepared for this exact scenario. Order 66 was transmitted through all clone channels across the entire galaxy. In the far reaches of space, on battlefields scattered across countless star systems, the inhibitor chips implanted in each clone soldier were activated simultaneously. Jedi who had fought side by side with their troops for 3 long years of war were suddenly seen as traitors to the Republic. Commanders who had formed genuine bonds with their Jedi generals turned their weapons against them without hesitation, without remorse, their minds enslaved by programming that replaced years of camaraderie with absolute obedience. On the ice plains of distant worlds, in the skies above remote planets, Jedi fell under the relentless fire of clones who moments before were their most trusted allies. The galaxy was painted red with Jedi blood as the greatest betrayal in history unfolded in real time, a mass execution coordinated with terrifying military precision. Finally, after what seemed an eternity to Anakin, the council chamber door opened and Mace Windu entered, exhaustion evident in every line of his face, but also an iron determination that had not diminished. Anakin stood immediately, his eyes searching for answers. Windu walked up to him, his voice grave and solemn when he finally spoke. "It is finished, Anakin." Palpatine resisted and revealed his true nature. He died as the Sith he always was. There was sadness in Windu's words, not for Palpatine's loss, but for what his betrayal represented for the Republic they had sworn to protect. You fulfilled the prophecy, Anakin. You discovered the Sith Lord hidden among us and gave the Jedi the chance to end this war. An action worthy of a Jedi Master. But before Anakin could fully absorb these words, before he could feel any relief or triumph, the temple alarm began to sound with deafening urgency. Both ran to the windows and looked down, their hearts sinking as they saw the 501st Legion marching in combat formation toward the Jedi Temple, their weapons ready, their intentions mortally clear even from a distance. Mace Windu stood motionless for a moment, his eyes fixed on the clone troops advancing in impeccable military formation toward the Jedi Temple. His mind, trained through decades of Jedi discipline and combat strategy, began connecting the dots with alarming speed. The activation of Order 66 could not have come from Palpatine. He had personally ensured the Sith Lord was dead. Only one person would have both the motivation and authority to execute such betrayal on a galactic scale. A meta? Windu murmured, the name leaving his lips like a bitter curse. The Vice-Chancellor had always been Palpatine's shadow, his closest advisor, always present but rarely noticed. Of course he would know of the Chancellor's true plans. Of course he would have his own protocols in place should the unthinkable happen. Anakin turned to Windu, confusion and anger mixing on his face. What do we do, Master? The question hung in the air as the sound of marching boots echoed ever closer to the temple. While Windu and Anakin watched the clone army approach, Mas Amedda was already executing the next phase of his plan with calculated precision and absolute coldness. He convened an emergency session of the Galactic Senate, his imposing presence dominating the central podium as thousands of senators from countless worlds watched through holograms and floating seats. With dramatic gestures and a voice full of fabricated indignation, Amedda presented carefully edited security recordings showing Mace Windu and other Jedi Masters invading Supreme Chancellor Palpatine's office. The images showed lightsabers ignited, fierce combat, and finally the fall of the Republic's elected leader. What the recordings did not show was Palpatine's attack with Force lightning, his transformation into a figure twisted by the dark side, or any evidence that he was a Sith Lord. To the watching senators, it appeared to be exactly what Amedda wanted it to seem. A brutal coup d'etat executed by the supposed Guardians of Peace. Murmurs of shock and indignation filled the Senate chamber as Amedda let the images speak for themselves. Citizens of the Republic, Amedda began, his voice echoing through the massive Senate chamber with imperial authority. We have witnessed today the greatest betrayal in our history. The Jedi who swore to protect the Republic have turned against us. They assassinated our elected leader, and even now conspire to take control of the government. He paused, allowing his words to penetrate deeply into the collective consciousness of the assembled senators. The Republic, as we know it, is too weak to deal with this threat. Our democratic systems, our constitutional safeguards, all have been exploited by the Jedi in their quest for absolute power. Amedda raised his hands, his expression becoming solemn and determined. Only through the transformation of our Republic into a galactic empire, with centralized executive powers capable of swift and decisive response, can we hope to combat this Jedi insurrection and bring order back to the galaxy. Therefore, I declare myself Galactic Emperor, and promise to use these powers only until the Jedi threat is completely eliminated. The Senate's response was mixed, with some senators applauding enthusiastically while others, like Bail Organa, Padme and Mon Mothma, watched with growing horror. But the majority, tired of 3 years of brutal war, desperate for any promise of peace and stability, accepted Amedda's words without questioning too deeply. Across the galaxy, Order 66 continued its relentless execution. Jedi fell on distant battlefields, betrayed by soldiers they trusted implicitly. Veteran masters, experienced knights, even young Padawans were targets of the cruel programming implanted in the clones. On Kashyyyk, Master Yoda felt the massive disturbance in the Force, thousands of lights extinguishing simultaneously like stars dying in a night sky. On frozen planets and jungle worlds, in space stations and war cruisers, the hunt for the Jedi had begun with brutal efficiency and frightening coordination. It was a mass execution, all orchestrated with military precision that would have made Palpatine proud of his successor. Leading this hunt was Admiral Tarkin, a man whose name was already synonymous with calculated cruelty and relentless efficiency in the Republic. At that time, he served as one of the most prominent military commanders of the Republic Navy, favored by Palpatine precisely because, unlike the Jedi, Tarkin possessed no ethical scruples that might interfere with total victory. He had repeatedly advocated the doctrine of total force in war, arguing that compassion was weakness and that enemies should be crushed without mercy or hesitation. When Ameta assumed power and activated Order 66, Tarkin saw an opportunity to finally implement his philosophies without the annoying interference of the Jedi and their obsolete moral codes. His first target would not be some distant outpost or isolated Jedi master. No, Tarkin had his sights fixed on the ultimate prize, the Jedi Temple itself on Coruscant, the pulsing heart of the Order he so despised. With fleets of clones under his command and Imperial authorization to use any force necessary, Tarkin planned to transform the Jedi Sanctuary into their tomb. Inside the temple, Mace Windu and Anakin Skywalker quickly mobilized the defenses, knowing they had only minutes before the attack began in full force. Windu transmitted urgent messages through all available Jedi channels, calling back to Coruscant any Jedi who were still alive and capable of responding. His voice, normally so controlled and measured, carried an urgency that made blood freeze. All Jedi, return to the temple immediately. We are under attack. The Republic has betrayed us. Return now. Anakin ran through the sacred corridors, organizing the Jedi who remained in the temple, young Padawans, knights in training, and the few masters who had not been sent to war. Lightsabers were distributed, defensive positions established, and emergency shields activated. Yoda and Obi-Wan Kenobi, both sensing the catastrophic disturbance in the Force, managed to escape the clone traps in their respective locations and immediately departed for Coruscant, their ships cutting through hyperspace at maximum speed. Every second counted, and both knew they might be running to their deaths. But the temple was sacred, and their Jedi brothers needed them. In the Senate, Padme Amidala watched Ameta's speech alongside Bail Organa, her heart sinking deeper with each poisonous word the new emperor proclaimed. This nascent empire was built on lies, on the perversion of truth to serve the ambition of power-hungry men. But what terrified her more than any political declaration was the overwhelming concern for Anakin. He was in the Jedi Temple, exactly where Imperial forces would attack first. Padme desperately tried to contact him through her personal communicator, her fingers trembling as she typed urgent messages. But all she received was static and silence. The Temple's communications had been blocked, isolating the Jedi from the rest of the galaxy. Bail placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, but both knew that words of comfort were empty before what was to come. All Padme could do was watch the skies of Coruscant and pray that Anakin would survive the hell about to begin. The confrontation finally began when the 501st Legion, led personally by Admiral Tarkin through tactical communicators, reached the outer stairs of the Jedi Temple. Mace Windu and Anakin Skywalker stood side by side at the main entrance, their lightsabers ignited, purple and blue glowing defiantly against the tide of white armor approaching. Behind them, dozens of Jedi of all ages and abilities prepared to defend their sacred home. Anakin looked at the soldiers who had been his brothers in battle, men with whom he had laughed, fought, and bled, and felt a deep sadness mix with his determination. "Troops of the 501st, he shouted. "You don't have to do this. Resist the programming. We fought together, bled together. Remember who you are." But the clones advanced without hesitation, their weapons raised, their faces hidden by identical helmets, transformed from allies into soulless executioners. Windu looked at Anakin briefly, a look of deep respect passing between them. "May the Force be with us," he murmured. Then, with a roar of defiance, both advanced to meet the attack, and the Battle of the Jedi Temple began, a confrontation that would determine the fate of the entire Order. The situation in the Jedi Temple was deteriorating rapidly as endless waves of clone soldiers advanced up the sacred stairs, their blasters firing coordinated volleys that illuminated Coruscant's night with deadly red flashes. Anakin Skywalker moved like a hurricane of blue light, his saber cutting through the air as he deflected shots and desperately tried to reach the men who had been his brothers. "Apex! Rex, stop this! It's me, General Skywalker. You know me." His voice carried genuine desperation, a desperate plea for the humanity within those soldiers to break through the cruel programming controlling them. But the clones continued advancing like automatons, their faces hidden by identical helmets, their weapons never stopping firing. The pain in his heart grew with each second, knowing he was being forced to fight against men he considered friends, brothers in everything except blood. Mace Windu, however, did not have the same emotional attachment to the clones that Anakin carried as a heavy burden. His mind was purely tactical, calculating attack angles, coordinating defensive movements, transforming battle chaos into a choreographed dance of survival. Through short, precise commands transmitted through the Force and communicators, Windu orchestrated the Jedi defense with impressive mastery. Knights took positions in narrow corridors where the clones' superior numbers became a disadvantage. Padawans used the Force to erect improvised barriers from rubble and ancient furniture. Under Windu's leadership, the Jedi not only resisted but momentarily pushed the clones back, creating a defensive line that seemed impossible to break. Bodies of clone soldiers began to accumulate on the stairs, a terrible testament to Jedi skill. But even Windu's tactical genius had its limits against overwhelming numbers and infinite resources. For every clone that fell, 10 more took their place, marching over the bodies of their fallen brothers without hesitation. The clones' ammunition seemed inexhaustible. Their reinforcements continued arriving in transports that constantly landed around the temple. The Jedi, however skilled they were mortal, and fatigue began to set in even among the most experienced warriors. Young Padawans began to fall, brought down by shots that managed to pass through exhausted defenses. Windu knew, with the cold certainty of an experienced strategist, that it was only a matter of time before they were completely overwhelmed. The temple was transforming into a tomb, and there was no visible exit. It was then, when hope seemed to have completely abandoned the temple defenders, that two familiar presences exploded through the Force like supernovas of pure light. Master Yoda arrived first, his small green form leaping from an airspeeder directly into the middle of the clone formation on the stairs, his green-bladed lightsaber spinning in impossible arcs. Obi-Wan Kenobi landed moments later. "Forgive my delay," Obi-Wan called with an ironic smile. "Traffic in Coruscant is absolutely terrible lately." Anakin felt relief flood through him at seeing his former master alive and whole. Yoda joined Windu at the main entrance, his ancient eyes sweeping the battlefield with wisdom accumulated through 800 years. "Win this war, we cannot," Yoda declared, his voice small but carrying absolute authority. He struck his staff against the floor, emphasizing his words. "Matter of time only it is, before numbers overwhelm us. Precise strikes make we must. Eliminate Tarkin and the Emperor we must. Only thus, deactivate the clones we can." Windu turned to Yoda, surprise crossing his severe features. "Emperor?" Ameda declared himself Emperor. The information was new, and the weight of that revelation settled over all present. Anakin felt anger boil inside him. "I'll go after Tarkin," he declared, his voice cutting through the noise with determination. He knew Tarkin from the Clone Wars, had served under the Admiral's command and witnessed his calculated cruelty. Obi-Wan nodded firmly. "I'll go with you, Anakin. You'll need cover." Yoda observed the pair and made his decision. "Then destroy the Emperor I will. Small target I am." Windu would remain in the temple, leading the defense. Anakin and Obi-Wan moved through the temple's upper levels with Force-enhanced speed, avoiding clone patrols and using secret passages. They reached a side landing platform where a Jedi interceptor awaited. The infiltration of Tarkin's flagship was a nightmare of precision and calculated risk. They approached using old codes, deactivating transponders and taking advantage of the battle's chaos. Once aboard through a maintenance hatch, Obi-Wan took defensive position in a critical corridor. "Go, Anakin. I'll keep this path open." Anakin nodded and ran toward the command bridge, sensing through the Force where Tarkin was. Clones tried to intercept him, but Anakin was like a ghost, dodging shots with preternatural precision. He burst through the bridge doors, and there was Tarkin, studying holographic displays with cold satisfaction. Tarkin turned at the sound of intrusion, his eyes evaluating Anakin coldly. "Skywalker, I'm impressed you made it this far. But this ship has 1,000 clones." He never finished the sentence. Anakin crossed the distance in the blink of an eye, his saber cutting the air with blinding speed. The duel lasted seconds. Anakin disarmed the Admiral, and then his saber found its target. Tarkin fell without a sound. Anakin assumed the command station, his fingers flying over controls he knew intimately. "Attention all clone forces." His voice echoed through every communicator in the fleet. "This is General Skywalker. Tarkin is dead. I have assumed command of this ship. Cease fire immediately." It was a highest-rank code, and for a moment it worked. Anakin redirected the flagship's weapons toward the clone formations around it, creating the space the Jedi needed. While Anakin took orbital control, Master Yoda executed his own mission with silent efficiency. He infiltrated the Senate using the ventilation duct system, his diminutive size becoming a tactical advantage. Yoda moved through spaces where no human could fit, passing checkpoints that were never designed to detect something so small. Ameda's personal guard, the Senate guards with their ceremonial spears, never saw him coming. Yoda emerged directly in the Imperial chamber where Ameda would establish his throne. The guards reacted with impressive speed, but they were fighting against a Jedi Master who had perfected his style through centuries. Yoda leaped and spun, his green saber creating patterns of deadly light. One by one, the guards fell. Then Yoda stood before Mas Ameda, the self-proclaimed emperor. "Your empire ends here," Yoda said simply, and ignited his saber one last time. When Yoda left the chamber, the empire had lasted less than a day, dying before it was even born. Order 66 was cancelled the moment Mas Ameda's death was confirmed through Imperial channels, and instantly, as if awakening from a collective nightmare, the clone soldiers stopped firing. Anakin Skywalker, still on the command bridge of Tarkin's flagship, watched through holographic monitors as the troops below simply froze in the middle of their actions, their weapons lowering slowly. He could see confusion emanating from them even at a distance, soldiers looking at their own hands as if they didn't recognize what they had done. Anakin also ceased fire immediately, his hands trembling slightly over the controls as adrenaline began to dissipate. Through the bridge windows, he could see the Jedi Temple, its majestic structure now marked by blaster scars and collapsed sections, smoke rising from its sacred towers against Coruscant's sky. Victory had a bitter taste, mixed with ashes and blood of fallen brothers. The Jedi Temple had been partially destroyed, its ancient libraries burned, its meditation halls transformed into battlefields. More than half the Jedi Order had perished, not just in the Temple battle, but scattered across the galaxy when Order 66 activated simultaneously. Veteran masters, promising knights, Padawans full of potential, all lost in a matter of hours. The survivors walked through the damaged corridors in reverent silence, their faces marked by pain and loss, but also by iron determination. Mace Windu coordinated recovery efforts, organizing teams to locate survivors under rubble. Obi-Wan Kenobi worked tirelessly alongside medical teams, using the Force to stabilize wounded Jedi. But despite the destruction, despite the terrible losses, they had survived and won against impossible odds. In the Galactic Senate, Bail Organa led a complete investigation of the events that had led to the tragedy. Evidence was discovered in Palpatine and Ameda's personal archives, meticulous records documenting their involvement in creating the Clone Wars and their manipulation of both sides of the conflict. Holograms of conversations between Palpatine and Count Dooku were presented to the Senate, showing without doubt that the Chancellor had orchestrated the entire war. The truth was impossible to deny, and the galaxy watched with growing horror. Bail Organa, whose warnings about excessive executive powers had been ignored during the war, was elected by overwhelming unanimity as the new Supreme Chancellor, charged with guiding the Republic back to its fundamental democratic principles. During this period of reconstruction, Padme Amidala gave birth to twins in Coruscant, with Anakin holding her hand through every moment. Luke and Leia Skywalker entered the world surrounded by love and hope. Anakin looked at the two small beings that he and Padme had created, his blue eyes shining with tears of joy, and felt the Force pulse around them with surprising intensity. These children would be special, he could feel, destined for great things. Padme, exhausted but radiant, smiled at Anakin with a love that transcended words, and in that moment, he knew he had made the right choice by remaining in that council chamber. Everything he valued most was now safe in his arms. Weeks later, when the temple had been partially repaired, the council summoned Anakin for a formal meeting. Windu stood, his eyes carrying genuine approval. Anakin Skywalker, by unanimity of this council, you are invited to assume the rank of Jedi Master. Your wisdom in trusting the Order, your courage in confronting Tarkin, and your leadership during our darkest hour have proven that you deserve this title. Anakin stood slowly, his expression serious. Masters, I accept this honor. But before doing so, I have something to confess. I am married to Senator Padme Amidala. The twins she gave birth to are my children, Luke and Leia Skywalker. Obi-Wan closed his eyes with resigned understanding. Windu and Yoda were emphatic. This was forbidden, Skywalker, Windu declared. The code is clear about attachments. Yoda struck his staff. Continue in the Order married, you cannot, Anakin. Choose you must. Order, Anakin repeated, looking around the damaged chamber. The Order was almost destroyed. More than half our brothers are dead because we became so rigid that we didn't see the darkness growing right under our noses. He walked to the windows. Isn't it time for changes to happen? The Force has sought balance for generations, sending me as the chosen one. Isn't it time for the Order to adjust to this? Anakin turned to the council, his eyes shining with conviction. Preventing a being from having a family is not balance, it's extremism. Denying love, denying connection. That's not the way of the light. It's just fear disguised as wisdom. The room fell into absolute silence. They could feel something special in that moment, a shift in the Force itself. The chosen one was finally taking the place for which he was born. From that day forward, everything was different in the Jedi Order. The Masters agreed to debate and change aspects of the code considered inviolable for millennia. Anakin, now officially a Jedi Master, led these reforms with growing wisdom. Jedi would no longer be forbidden from forming families, as long as they understood the difference between love and possessive attachment. His powers in the Force increased constantly, particularly as Luke and Leia grew, their presences amplifying Anakin's connection with the Force. When Master Yoda finally departed, becoming one with the Force, the council was unanimous. It was time for the Chosen One to assume his destiny, Grand Master of the Jedi Order. Anakin accepted the mantle with humility, swearing to honor all those who had fallen. Anakin Skywalker, Grand Master of the Jedi Order, and Padme Amidala, one of the Republic's most respected senators, lived in Coruscant as a family. Leia demonstrated from an early age burning passion for politics and justice, frequently accompanying her mother to the Senate. Luke was fascinated by the ways of the Force, meditating with his father and demonstrating natural talent for piloting. On peaceful afternoons, the Skywalker family would sit on the balcony of their apartment, watching Coruscant's endless horizon, millions of lights blinking like terrestrial stars. Luke always ended these moments the same way, his young eyes shining with dreams of the future, his small voice full of determination. I'll be the best pilot in the galaxy, Father. I'll fly faster than anyone, even faster than you. And Anakin would laugh, musing his son's blonde hair, knowing there was no limit to what his children could achieve in a galaxy finally free from the shadows.